I am in Eric's Drooker's studio. This is Naked City, his most recent work. And I'm looking over here at his workstation. And this is a cover from the New Yorker. And this is Hellgate Bridge, which a lot of people won't know about. That everyone knows about the Brooklyn Bridge, but the Hellgate Bridge is another story. And so I'm going to turn the floor over to you, Eric. Maybe I'll be panning around a little bit, as I'm wont to do, until I finally settle in. Eric, I'm going to give the floor over to you. And we were just starting to talk a little bit about that piece on your drawing board. Do you want to say something about that?
Well, that was a couple of years ago. That was the cover that they ran in the fall of 2022. And as you mentioned, it's not the Brooklyn Bridge. It's not the Manhattan Bridge, it's not the Williamsburg Bridge, it's not even the George Washington Bridge. It's one of the lesser known bridges in New York City called the Hellgate Bridge. You can't make the shit up. It's way out in the forgotten borough of Queens. Well, and it's a train bridge. You can't walk over it.
Yeah.
You can't drive over it with an automobile. It's just built for trains. And it's been standing for over 100 years. But no one much knows about it or ever mentions it. So I thought, okay, this would be a good New Yorker cover, the Hellgate Bridge. It hasn't been done yet. They've had dozens of covers with the Brooklyn Bridge. Why not give a little attention to the Hellgate Bridge?
Now, you were saying that you wanted to say something about the most recent New Yorker cover you
Right,
worked on.
because this Hellgate Bridge, that was 2 years ago, back in October, that one appeared. And then just last week, this hit the newsstand. So this was hot off the press.
Oh, you wanted to move the flag?
Annual money issue. Well, here we go.
There you go.
Yeah, so you can actually see the artwork. I think this is one of my more pointed images. You see the Wall Street, we're down on Wall Street, when the Wall Street businessman is laughing his ass off all the way to the bank on his cell phone, and he's about to step on our face. So it's obviously about to happen. There's nothing too abstract about it. You could see exactly what's going on. Whereas this is more of a kind of poetic mood piece. This is one of my more hard-hitting images. I've done a couple of money issues over the years. Every October they have the annual money issue.
Ah, okay, that makes sense.
And I think this was the third money issue I've done over the years. Anyway, I've got dozens of them. This was issue number 40. I've done 40 covers for the New Yorker. I never thought I'd be.
That seems like maybe a record.
It's a lot. I've only occasionally do I do one of their interior gag cartoons. No, I'm like the cover boy. I didn't see that coming.
Well, from hearing you describe it in your presentation, it just seems like it organically happened.
I think of the New Yorker covers as just a seamless extension of my street posters. Most people who see the New Yorker on the newsstand don't buy the magazine, they walk right past it. So it just functions as a street poster. You'll see it in an airport. You'll see it sitting there in the dentist's office. You know, it's not like you're buying it or looking through it, but thousands, maybe millions of people see the cover, the image on the cover. And in that regard, it's very much like my street posters I've done over the years, where I'm attempting to infiltrate the consciousness of people just walking by the big city, and they'll see a poster on the street. They may not even focus in on it or think that it's affecting them, but on some level, I think that everything we see or hear or feel stays with us and is affecting our consciousness. We'll have dreams about it later on. It's all art affects us primarily on an unconscious level. I think overwhelmingly unconscious. And even the inspiration and the reason why the artist does the work is mostly mysterious to the artist. You know, the artist may think they know why they're doing it. You know, I thought I was just doing it because I needed to pay my rent, so I was hustling the New Yorker. Yeah, but there were all kinds of other reasons why the symbolism of this bridge had some urgency, why you felt like you needed to get it down on the page and express it and communicate it to other people.
So picking up where we left off, Eric, I was saying before we started up again that there's always patterns in art, and I'll just give it back to you.
Right, patterns and recurring themes. We all have recurring dreams all our lives. So this one ran last week, but as you can see, this was really a variation on a theme. This is really just a more extreme, urgent version of a cover I did 20 years earlier of a similar vantage point, a worm's eye view looking up in Midtown Manhattan at some businessman. He's having a poetic moment looking up at a bird, a pigeon. It's a lot more than an innocent image. Here was a environmental cover from about 3 years ago. Don Quixote, Picasso's Don Quixote, but updated to the 21st century. You know, what the windmills look like nowadays. So there's just a handful of some of my greatest hits. Like I say, I did about over 40 covers over the years. This is one of just simply a pretty, some of them are just pretty images, kind of romantic views of New York City. Down on the subway. Right, it can't all be political, confrontational art. Some of it is just these moments that we have in the midst of all of the chaos. And here's an autumn on a brilliant October, November day in Central Park. Autumn in Central Park. Uh-oh, here we're getting confrontational again. This was not a New Yorker cover. This is an image blown up from the story Flood, my first graphic novel. But this has been an image that stands on its own. It's been used on a couple of album covers. The band Faith No More used it, sold 1 million copies with that. I should have asked for more money in the first place. How was I to know it was going to be a hit? But they saw it in my first graphic novel, which came out a few decades ago, Flood, which was semi-autobiographical about this artist, you know, who lives in the Lower East Side, and some of the adventures and unfortunate occurrences that happened to him. Well, some good things happened to him too. My style has evolved so much since I've done that. But you could see the influence of underground comics and R. Crumb and some of the other Zap artists who I discovered when I was about 10 or 11 years old. I found them in a bookstore on the Lower East Side. So they influenced me at a tender young age. Here's where I started getting experimental, right? When he gets kicked out, suddenly there are 4 panels on a page. Suddenly there are 16 panels on a page, 32 panels in a spread. And as his life is on a downward spiral, things multiply to, 64 images on a page. A little bit like cell division, right? The zygote, the sperm fertilizes the egg. You know, we're one cell, then we're 2 cells, then we're 4, 8, 16, etc. until it just becomes this multiplicity of images, too many to count. And that's just the first chapter. The second chapter, it all takes place down on the L train, the Canarsie line, the crosstown subway in New York City. The guy keeps dozing off, falling asleep on the subway, and he has these bizarre dreams that he wakes up and he sees paintings, cave paintings down on the subway. So that's been a recurring theme I've used over the years, of Paleolithic paintings down on the New York subway. And then it starts raining in the third chapter. It starts raining and raining harder and harder and harder, and it seems that everybody in the city has an umbrella except for the central protagonist of the story. Eventually, he sees a guy out on 14th Street who's selling umbrellas for cheap. So he picks one up on his way home. As you can see, there are virtually no words in this story. Occasionally a word will insinuate itself, but it was an experiment in telling a long-form narrative without resorting to words, without using any captions or word balloons or thought balloons or anything like that. And it's got a very limited palette, black and blue, and that's about it. But I found that I didn't really need any words to tell the story, that as long as each image was very concrete and very loaded, powerful image. Here we have American history told in 12 easy steps, 12 panels from when Columbus first landed on the Western Hemisphere in 1492. I'm just cutting to the chase here, how history unfolds with our so-called manifest destiny. And the importation of slaves kidnapped from Africa and the role that they play in building wealth in the U.S. And it just ends right. So it begins with a boat and it ends with a boat, some kind of nuclear battleship in the final panel. So this is an example of how comics are definitely use the art of compression. You want to simplify. How much can you leave out and just get things down to their essential beats in the story? So here, the 12 beats are these moments in American history. The original betrayal, right? Thanksgiving, yeah. We're celebrating. And then, betrayal, the rape of the indigenous people on the entire continent, slavery, etc. This riot sequence, which explodes in the final pages of the book, was informed by my own experiences there in the East Village. I grew up in the Tompkins Square district of Lower Manhattan, and we had a series of big police riots there. The biggest one of all was in the long hot summer of 1988. August 6, 1988. In fact, this panel was originally drawn as a street poster. And I printed hundreds of them up, big, and we pasted them up all over the neighborhood. I later made a poster of this one as well. So you can see I go back and forth. The street posters sometimes wind up as panels in the graphic novels. Sometimes panels wind up being blown up and used as street posters. With the street posters, I sometimes will add words on the bottom just to anchor it in reality. But sometimes words are not necessary. Like an image like this doesn't really need any words. You can see that it's a David and Goliath image. The power dynamic, right?
Yeah.
And then I have these mythological themes like the flood, the biblical flood from the book of Genesis, where everything just gets immersed, submerged in water. And in this case, it's my old neighborhood of Lower Manhattan. And the artist finds himself underwater and he just barely escapes with his cat. In the very final pages, even the artist drowns and is eaten by sharks. But the cat is the sole survivor in the story. Sort of like Ishmael in Moby Dick is the sole survivor who tells the tale. This is what happens to the artist. The death of the artist, or the death of the artist's ego, is really what that's about. Because I had that on the new book too also has that. I kill the artist off at the end. The artist's ego is knocked off because he already had his day in the sun. What do you want? He wrote a whole trilogy. This was the second book in the City Trilogy. This one also was completely wordless. This one I got really strict. Aside from a couple of words at the beginning, the front matter and the copyright page here, it's really purely wordless. For the next 300 pages, the story is just told visually without resorting to any words or captions or syllables at all. And you could see the protagonist here is a young woman who lives in some kind of tropical background, and her island is on fire. It's invaded, and she barely escapes through the jungle, and she finally realizes what's going on, that these invaders had been cutting down the trees, just deforesting the island. And when she finally gets away, she conveniently finds a rowboat waiting for her. It's very dreamlike. The logic of it is a little bit like Where the Wild Things Are, right? All these books that influenced me as a child. So she escapes. She's the only one to escape. She's in the middle of the ocean, and she's hungry, and her dog, they're desperate for food. So the dog just uses his instinct, and they have a big feast that evening. And what they don't eat, the sharks devour. So I thought that words would really get in the way of the story. This is it's like a silent movie. And we're just following this one character through this journey across the ocean. Oh, we're having an electrical storm. She just barely survives this blood, red corpuscles, because that's the title, Blood Song. Corpuscles, blood cells under a microscope. And she comes to, you guessed it, the big city. She's never been in the city before. So the remainder of the book is all about her adventures that she has in the big city. And she finds that there's just lots and lots of people in the big city. It's completely overwhelming. She's never seen such crowds of people and traffic. And when she tries to take a rest for even just a few moments, immediately a police officer appears and tells her to keep moving. She encounters a street musician who is also harassed by the police, who take away his instrument, but they strike up a friendship. And she goes home with the musician, who lives up on the rooftop, and he shares his can of sardines with her. So it has kind of a romantic ending. She finds love in the end. Towards the very end, though, he goes out without a saxophone, and he finds he's able to just perform vocally, and the crowd loves it. Of course, the police immediately hose everyone down and spray everything with tear gas and bust the musician, throw him in maximum security prison, because, hey, we're getting into the middle of the 21st century here. Things are dystopian, aren't they? And this is how it ends. Well, I won't show the final pages, because I wouldn't want to spoil it for anybody who might actually want to buy the book. These are all available through my website or online. But this is the one that just came out. This is hot off the press. It's the final volume in the City Trilogy. This one's a bit of a departure because in this graphic novel I actually use words. I use the full vocabulary of comics. I use captions, word balloons, thought balloons, sound effects. I felt like I was holding back with those earlier volumes, but I always just loved comics and using the full range of comic language, especially thought balloons. I feel like people don't use thought bubbles like they used to. It's mostly, they've been replaced by captions now for some reason, but I always love thought bubbles where you can actually hear what the different characters are thinking about.
Yeah.
So again, the main protagonist is a young woman who hitchhikes to the big city. She gets a job as an artist's model because she's desperate for rent money. But she tries to make a living as a street performer. She eventually is very successful at it, but again, I'm not going to spoil it for anyone. The artist, the painter, is kind of the comic relief in what is otherwise a pretty serious story. The young woman, Isabel, her story is actually, she's having a very difficult time. I don't want to give it away, but we learn in a series of flashbacks here that before she hitchhiked to the big city, she endured a series of childhood traumas that we're not going to dwell on here. What happened with her parents? One morning her mother is just taken away by the ICE police, immigration officials, when she's about 5 years old. So it's a serious story, but then every other chapter has a completely different palette, and it's about the painter, and he's a goofier character. He's more of a traditional cartoon character. There's more slapstick in these chapters. So this is, again, very consciously, the comic relief of what's happening with the painter who's also trying to make a living, selling his work, but he finds that the marketplace is very fickle. His gallery dealer likes some of the work that's no longer in it's no longer in vogue. You know, this happens to artists. We're successful for a period of time, but then our style goes out. It goes out of style. That's what happened to Rembrandt. He was very successful as a young man, but then the public got tired of these somber colors that he was using, these browns and dark colors. They wanted something with bright pastel colors. So then Rembrandt was out of a gig, and he died penniless. So this painter is a kind of an amalgam of all the different painters through the centuries, who's now kind of an anachronism in the 21st century. It's virtually impossible to be this kind of artist and make a living at it. We also encounter this character, the street dancer. She's one of the main characters who we get very intimate with. She's a bit of a trickster character, Alex. She's almost like a Bugs Bunny character where she says, "Hey, how about I'll be the painter and I could paint you. You could pose for me. You'll be the model and I'll be the painter just for the next painting." She talks him into it. So there's a role reversal there. Yeah, like I say, this book is mainly it's a comedy. I'm calling it a comedy.
Yeah, I would.
Unlike these earlier volumes, which were definitely tragic books, this one's a comic book. Maybe it would be more accurate to call it a tragicomedy. But I'm marketing it as a comedy. And I got Peter Bagg. I get some really nice blurbs. Kim Deitch, some of my favorite cartoon heroes on the back cover. So this is the one that's hot off the press. You can get it from me. You can get it in any bookstore. wherever books are sold. But if you buy it through my website, you could get a signed copy from me. And I'll even draw a special drawing for you. Each one will have its own individual drawing just because you came right to the source.
Okay, I love it. Thank you. That is quite an amazing overview.
It's an overview of the graphic novels. Other comics I've done over the years are mostly just 1 or 2 pages. I've done some 1-page strips for the New Yorker over the years, or World War III Illustrated. Right, I'm friends with those guys for the last 40 years. Seth Tabachman and Peter Cooper, right? I got to be buddies with them back in the early 1980s when Ronald Reagan was president. And they asked me to join them and become one of the editors with them. So in some of those earlier issues, I was one of the editors of World War III. Now I just contribute sporadically. From time to time, I send them things, and it's amazing that it's still being published at all. World War III Illustrated still comes out 40 years later, 45 years later. Who would have thought?
Yeah, it's going strong.
So many other magazines have come and gone. I mean, even Newsweek has gone out of business. I mean, print media has been on a downward spiral, and yet World War III Illustrated still comes out about once a year or so.
So what was going on between Bloodsong and Naked City? I know that you did that presentation at City Light, so there's a strong Allen Ginsberg connection. Could you talk about that?
Yeah, well, Allen Ginsberg, the beat poet, was someone who I got to be pretty good friends with in my neighborhood in New York, because we lived 2 blocks apart from each other for decades. So I would see him around, and as I got older and was doing more street posters in the neighborhood, Allen eventually realized that I was the artist responsible for so many of the street posters around the neighborhood, and confessed that he had been peeling them off the brick walls and had a collection of them at home, and which normally would have bugged me, but I made an exception in Ginsberg's case. So we got to be pretty good friends. Here we are on East 10th Street in front of my apartment. Ginsberg lived on East 12th Street. So we were just like, neighbors, couple of blocks away. And he suggested that I try to illustrate or illuminate his best-known poem called Howl. And it wasn't until Allen died in 1997. So they made a movie here in San Francisco of Howl around 2010. So this was a project I worked on posthumously, but it was based on a suggestion that Allen had made to me near the end of his life to do artwork to go with his poem, Howl. And so it was the animation. I was hired to be the animation designer for Howl, and they had hired Hollywood actors. This is Allen Ginsberg writing the poem in San Francisco in the mid-1950s. But in the movie, they hired Hollywood actors like James Franco played the part of the young Allen Ginsberg, and they had actors playing the young Jack Kerouac and Neil Cassidy. But I was really focusing in on Allen and the backstory of writing this poem, this really groundbreaking poem called Howl. And there's just a profusion of images. I mean, his writing is so concrete and so graphic that I didn't have any problem just coming up with hundreds of different images that were used, and these were all animated. The animated sequences in the film, which you could watch. I guess it's on Netflix or something. You could stream it. Mm-hmm. Howl, the movie. And then around the time the movie came out, I got the rights to do a graphic novelization of it, since I had designed all of the artwork. And then I selected some of the key moments to use, and I designed it as a book, using all of the stanzas from the poem. So it's the uncensored poem. The entire Howl poem is in here, which was originally busted when the book first came out in the 1950s. The police raided the City Lights bookshop and threw Lawrence Ferlinghetti in jail for knowingly selling obscene material. And then there was this long obscenity trial which ensued, and the judge finally found the poem to have redeeming social value. So this is the complete poem without anything being edited out or censored. You get the complete text of the Ginsberg's poem and all of the artwork. And as you can see, it's very different from my other graphic novels. It's really animation art that I'm using, but some of it is sequential, so we're calling it a graphic novel. I wanted to call it Howl a graphic poem. Get it?
That would make sense.
Because it is a very graphic poem. That's why it got busted. But the publisher, a big mainstream publisher, HarperCollins, big corporate publisher, thought from a marketing point of view, no, graphic poem, that's too obscure. We'll just call it a graphic novel. Yeah, graphic novels are selling really well in bookstores. They have a whole category now of graphic novels. So that was okay with me. I didn't fight them on that point. Anyhow, this was one of the kind of in-between projects that I was working on. I spent a couple of years just designing the animation for this movie, and then I was able to repurpose all of this, all of the concept art and all of the keyframes in the animation, and just lay it out in the format of a book. And we're calling it a graphic novel, so it is. That's a sequence, right? That's a sequential art. So it's a type of graphic novel, but it's very different, as you can see from this City Trilogy. Stylistically, these kind of stand on their own. This is a very different animal. So although technically I've done 4 graphic novels over the years, it's these 3 are what I'm calling the trilogy.
Yeah.
And again, this is the latest one and the most, definitely the longest work that I've ever done. It's a long-form graphic novel with lots and lots of words and captions and word balloons and sound effects. Oh, and this one is in hardcover, right? Most of these earlier books, the publisher just did them in paperback, but this one was released in hardcover. So look out!
That's great.
You could do someone a lot of harm with one of these,
or a lot of good too.
You could probably build a house out of bricks made out of these graphic novels.
Well, thanks to Dark Horse for doing that.
Dark Horse, yeah, they did a beautiful job. Excellent production values, as you can see, with the spot gloss.
Yes.
And all that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, they did a really nice job. And also this one is, most pages have just a limited palette, right? But then there are sequences that have full color, so it's a full color. The whole thing is printed in full color.
Well, it's beautiful. Well, thank you, Eric. Thanks for taking this time with me.
Well, thank you for documenting it all, and for listening to all of the random thoughts of an artist. You know, when an artist is working at the drawing board, all kinds of thoughts are buzzing around in their heads, but you know, we're keeping it to ourselves. And then we just hand in the finished work, and it's, you know, immaculately conceived. But in this little interview we did, you got a little peek, you know, under the hood, as it were, you know, what goes on, some of the thinkings, and you know, the process of doing all these works. And then beyond that, they just gradually accumulate over the years. Kind of takes on a life of its own, and then over the years I got hundreds and hundreds of these images. And I try to sell them. I don't want to wind up being stuck with them. I like to sell them so collectors have them hanging on the walls of their houses. It makes them happy. They give me some Benjamins, which I then hand over to my landlord. And I have a little money left over that I could buy food with, and even a little money left over to buy cat food with and kitty litter with. And it's win-win. We're all happy. And I don't have this art taking over my life because with any luck, I just sold this one to a dude in Australia.
Oh, wow.
He bought this one and he bought all of these prints from me. So I gotta take them and send them through FedEx or something and ship them all.
Well,
all
absolutely.
In one shot.
Well,
Yeah.
I hope he likes this video.
Yes, you'll eventually see the video too.
There you go.
We're even having a shout out to the collector in Australia.
Okay.
Okay, well thanks Henry.
Yeah, you bet.
Thanks for visiting me here in my humble studio.
Absolutely. Thank you.